I'm Becky McCoy. Up until, January 1 of 2018, I've been a CPA for many, many years. That was a path that I went down after another career. I originally started out as a graduate with an economics degree from William and Mary, and I worked over in Smithfield Foods for many years. Um, a rather interesting industry to work in, very male dominated and very, I would say, rough and tumble, especially back in the 80s when I started there. What I enjoyed of the job was related to the accounting field. And so I decided to go back to school, came to Christopher Newport, and my goal was to just take enough classes to qualify to sit for the CPA exam. And when I started looking at it, it was the difference of two more additional classes to get my second degree from here. And all I had to do, remember, if for those of you who are at the morning session with Brian, he was talking about the tuition in 1999. That's when I finished my degree. You could take 18 hours a semester for that. Okay, so all I had to do was tack on one extra class in those 2 semesters, and it cost me nothing but the books. And I got an accounting degree from CNU. Ended up going and working for the Auditor of Public Accounts up in Richmond, because back then, in order to get your CPA license, you had to have a minimum of 1,000 hours of experience underneath auditing work underneath a licensed CPA. So it was the best way to get that thousands of hours of experience to complete my CPA requirements and get my license. I worked there for 3 years, and what the Auditor of Public Accounts did was, and does, is audit all of these state agencies. And so we were going into all the various state agencies and auditing them to see whether they were complying with their legal mandate of spending taxpayers' dollars. Because each agency is created by law in Virginia and has a budget and receives, taxpayers' money and spends it according to that legal mandate that is established in the Code of Virginia. While doing that work, I also developed a specialty in fraud auditing. I would get called into where an agency had run amok, and we were investigating, really prosecuting criminal charges against people and putting them in jail. And we worked with the state police. I'll be honest, I didn't particularly like that work because it had a massive impact on people's lives. If we were investigating somebody, we were trying to put them away, which meant jail time, which meant ruining their careers, in many cases ruining their families. Yes, they had done something wrong or they wouldn't be convicted, but at the same time, it's a pretty big toll. And in one particular fraud audit, we discovered that the head of the agency who we were investigating, rumor had it she had connections with the New York Mafia, and so I had to be put in a hotel room under a different name while I continued my work. Not really fun. So
sounds like a TV series.
it does, doesn't it? I mean, they do reality shows on this nowadays. Yeah. So then I ended up going and working in, I also met my husband at the same time too, and he lived out in Matthews County and didn't really want to move to the city in Richmond where I lived. So we kind of negotiated. He's like, well, could you get a job out here? And so I started looking around, and I ended up at a tax and accounting firm in Gloucester, again, to get more experience. And then several years later, went out on my own and opened up my own firm. I basically do tax and consulting work. All of my work nowadays is related to real estate issues. I like dirt. And I have multi-generational families that I work with. I haven't taken on a new client for probably about 10 years because I'm full. Up to capacity. And so I've worked with these clients for, 20 years or so, and, 3 to 4 generations within a family. And it's very enjoyable work. It's very challenging because Congress keeps going crazy on us and changing the tax laws in very bizarre ways. We lost a lot of tax professionals with this last major tax law rewrite. A lot of people just said, I'm done, I'm retiring. I looked at it and said, oh, look at what fun this is. And oh, if we do some planning, look at how many tax dollars we can save. So I'm still with it. And it has been fun. And I'm just now working on the returns from all that planning for 2018. And it's turning out very well for my clients. So that's what I do. And I love it.
Sounds great,
It's fun.
except for the tax law part.
Well, yeah. You
I
have to
could
be a
skip
nerd
that.
to like the tax law part.
Maybe just tell me what I need to
Okay,
do, that's
yeah.
all. I'm Marsha Hudgins at Hudgins Construction. I started out graduating with a degree in healthcare sciences, physical therapy, early 70s, people. A long time ago, you were not born yet, so that's okay. I'm still here. So that seemed like a great way to make sure I had a job after I graduated. That was my mother's message to me. I'll pay for 4 years of college. You be able to work on day one and support yourself. But along the lines, I realized, travel through the healthcare industry, I realized that the people with the degrees ruled. People with degrees in management ruled everything. And because most of us were women in the industry at that time in physical therapy, there was very little power over our careers or over our life or how we did what we did or how we budgeted for our departments or hours we worked or anything. So before I actually got out of undergraduate, I applied to MBA program at ODU to do as part-time and work during the day. God bless them, they let me in even though I had nothing but science classes. I had to take a lot of remedial business classes very quickly to get up to the speed to take graduate courses. It took me 3 years. I managed to do it in that period of time, and there was only 2 of us that were female in the program. Back in those days, there was a lot of resistance for women in business above a certain level. MBA was not as popular as it is now in general, but it was reserved for those that were on, senior management tracks, which I can assure you were men in those days, not women. So blithely unaware of all of that, or even really caring about it, I just went. I thought, well, I'll get my degree and I'll figure out what to do with it afterwards. As it happened, healthcare went into a crisis of management in the 80s because they couldn't just get their costs reimbursed anymore, and they had to run it like a business. So there I was with my MBA, and I said, I'm going to come as a consultant. I'll help you figure this out. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was going to figure out, but I did understand the business model that they had been working under because it was part of my thesis from my graduate work when I got my MBA. So I was hired. I learned as I went. But I was still doing physical therapy on the side, some private clients, because I had to work to keep my license. You don't work for a number of years and you lose your license. So then I did more consulting outside of the hospitals and other startups, and things went really nicely. I opened up a couple of retail stores, 10, 12 years in retail. They were all unique experiences and challenges, and I learned a lot in the process. Finally, I thought around 55, I was going to kind of retire from all of this, take care of my horses, breed my horses, play. And that worked for a few years, traveling with my husband until he got cancer. And Hudgins Contracting was started by him in 1971. I knew about the business. We often talked about it. I gave him lots of advice, which he didn't take mostly. Once in a while, he'd say, okay, well, you had that. Maybe you were right about that. Because I can't stop giving advice. That's just not possible. But I let him have his business. It was his child. It was his thing. Except when he got the diagnosis that he was going to be dead in a few months, and then we had to do some scrambling. It was 2011, in the middle of the recession. We were still afloat and doing okay, making money, but not a lot. But we had made a lot of cuts during that time. And those that were still with us were the long-term people that had been there for 20, 25 years. If I shut the business down after he died, they wouldn't have had a job. They wouldn't have gotten another job because nobody was hiring for construction. There was very little work out there. So they, in their 50s, would have been without work or a chance of getting work for the rest of their careers until they got Social Security, and that probably wasn't going to do it. So he asked me, please, don't do it. Don't turn them out to pasture. I heard that a lot. And I promised I would not. So I walk in the door, 2012, January 2nd, and say, hi, I'm here and I'm going to be the hands-on person. And it was like going back to 1973. It's like they looked at me like, you are kidding me. You don't belong here. What, you don't know anything. And I didn't. And I fully admitted. But they also didn't want me to know anything. Why don't you go home? Leave it to us. We'll take care of everything. I said, yeah, but I have to sign for the bonds that guarantee the work that you do. And if it doesn't go well, they come after me personally. And the same with the bank. So I don't think I can just sit home and knit because I don't know how to knit, number one. Number two, I'm not real comfortable with that. So it was a journey. What I found was the old attitudes about women in a business that didn't have any women at all, except in the office doing clerical type of work. I think we had one project manager that was a woman in 25 years. That was it. It was a challenge, but I'm here to tell you that the world has changed from the early days back in the early 70s when I went out into the workforce and women were actively shunned from certain levels, and there was no question but to let you know that, you weren't capable of doing this. I still get that from the old guys. I laugh as I do what I do 8 years later and running my company. As the mama bear, as I am sometimes known by my guys out in the field. I think it's a compliment, but I'm not certain. I think there's a little bit of both in there, which is okay. I take that. The world is a much better place for women. The industries that are typically men, like Smithfield Foods, and says, I know what you speak. I used to go to functions and then people would point and they go, yeah, that's the wife. Like, no,
Yeah.
that's the CEO. You don't understand. But it works. Yeah. And then somebody told me I was badass. I'm like, really? Seriously? No. But anyway, so you get a better world. You do. And it's not perfect. It's just shifted a bit. You will not get, I don't believe, what we got in that dominated testosterone poisoned environment of the male jobs, the ones that have been typically only men. But you will still have your issues, and we should talk about them today sometime. Yeah. And that's it.
Leslie Doyle, Managing Director with U.S. Trust. It's Bank of America's private wealth management group. And so I started in the industry 22 years ago. So a lot has changed and evolved since then. I started with Merrill Lynch, and so I can say all 22 years have been with the same company because Merrill Lynch and U.S. Trust are now owned by Bank of America. But, I was telling this story. When I was an undergrad, I was a government history major with a minor in econ. And I thought I was going to have a totally different career path until one summer I did an internship and realized, nope, that is not for me. And so I do encourage internships or externships because that to me was, wow, what am I going to do now kind of experience. And I knew a couple things about myself. I knew I didn't want to live in a small town, and I wanted to make money. And so I had always, because of my father, read the Wall Street Journal, had an interest in it, but it wasn't something that I studied, but it was an interest and a passion. And so my first job was with Merrill Lynch. And so this was in the mid-90s, and when I was hired, I was the only female. There was one other female financial advisor, but she was in a back office and never stuck her head out. So when you talk about mentors, there were none. And so it was a very male-dominated office space. They thought I was an assistant, and certainly I was not going to be an assistant. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it just wasn't my path. And so it was hard. It was lonely starting out, and so it was fun too. I mean, it was fun. It was hard work. I was married young. I had children young, and so I decided I wanted to work in an environment where there was more of a team-based approach, and that was my reason for leaving Merrill and going into U.S. Trust. And so I think if you listen to the speaker last night, the courage and the evolve and the persevere, I mean, hands down, that is, I think, the method to success, because you have to have the courage to make decisions for your own career, what's better for you. Sometimes it's getting out of your comfort zone. And so leaving was hard. I was very fortunate. I got off to a great start at Merrill. So to leave a career that you feel comfortable in and you're having success in is uncomfortable. But I knew for my stage and where I was in life, I needed something that gave me a little bit better balance. And I did it. I think the other thing that really has helped lead in my career involvement was getting involved in philanthropy and in the community, because the experiences that I got by being involved in nonprofit organizations, that's where I learned and honed a lot of my leadership skills. And so you have to start somewhere, and your company's also like that. But I think for you and your personal involvement, again, you have to take ownership over that. And where can you learn? Where can you add value? Sometimes it's not going to be in your day job, and so it will require work and effort outside. And to me, I thought philanthropy was really important in that part of it. And I think, it has greatly evolved, but in some ways it hasn't. I mean, I still, the financial industry today is much more diversified. I think we have as many women working in the industry as we do men. We have a lot of women in leadership roles, which is great. But again, I had a comment last week where a gentleman in another part of the firm referred to my role as just to stand up and look pretty. And I thought, okay.
Well, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's in a different way. It's
Yeah.
not so much in your face, but it is still bubbling. And I think because they have not necessarily come along as fast as women have.
Yeah.
Now, younger guys, I don't get as much of that.
Yeah.
But if their family taught them that was that role, then you have a little problem.
Yeah. So it's, but with me, you take it with a grain of salt. It is, I laughed, said, okay.
And that's I think that is absolutely perfect, because that's what I've learned to do
Yeah.
as well. And I knew I was walking into the most male-dominated redneck sort of business that you could possibly have. But what I found out, two very important things. My guys had as much emotional involvement in their work and personally than any of the women did. I mean, in fact, if anything, the ones that have the most, I have to be the most careful with, because they have the most emotional reaction to failing or not doing well, are the guys. So,
Yeah.
it really was interesting for me to see these very rough and tough people be actually very sensitive inside. And so I really had to change my approach to them. And I guess that's what I'm going to say to you, that don't take people at their surface, how they look on the surface, because they may be very, very different underneath. And if you make the wrong assumption and you treat them, in a rough, stand up, I'm not going to put up with that, you may be missing that's how they've been enculturated to behave, but actually may be covering, some, very serious pain inside, which they end up in my office, and I have to talk to them down the cliff from. I mean, it's not a lie, it's the truth. But anyway.
Yeah, and there is a lot of truth to that, where, an ideal world would be that we are all gender blind, all color blind.
Right.
That would be ideal. Unfortunately, that isn't the world that we live in 100%, but that doesn't mean that you as an individual can't approach other individuals in that way. It's a choice. And, somebody may be coming at you. I mean, I had an instance when I was doing an audit where, all I did was go into the guy's office with a stack of vouchers. They didn't have all the supporting documents. I had to question them. They were his vouchers. And, I just sat down in his office and said, okay, I just have a few questions. And we started going through, and his anger level was going up and up and up and up. And finally, he just went on this rant. A lot of bad words. And the final sentence was, "You are too stupid and too incompetent to figure out what I've done." Never tell an auditor that, by the way. His whole agency just bought the audit from hell. I was going to be there until I had gone through everything. And the first thing I had to do was, of course, go back to my office and explain to my director and eventually the auditor of public accounts, because we got pulled into his office, what had happened. And I knew this was going to happen. So, I literally wrote down the whole conversation, all the words and everything, so it was all documented out. And, sitting there and I'm going, what triggered this guy? All I did was go in and ask a couple of some questions like, wow, and, I wasn't going to argue or anything. I just was like, okay, thank you. And, closed my little folder and, went off and went through my protocol that my office required that I do when we ran into a situation like that. And it turned out that he was somebody young. He felt very, very threatened in his position, and he knew he had done something wrong.
Yeah, that's what I would have guessed.
And he knew that he was going to lose his job. Okay. And he knew that he was going to be embarrassed. He had gotten the job through a political connection of his parents. So it was not going to just reflect badly on him. It was going to reflect badly on his parents. It was going to reflect badly on that current administration. There was all this stuff going on, and he felt that he had been, put into a corner just by what was a simple question. So rather than coming back aggressively against him, I just went on, and went through my protocol and did my job. I actually never had another conversation with him again. But after we went through the full finding and wrote up the audit report, it had to go to the director of that agency. And, sitting around the exit table, without any, you have to, sometimes end up, training yourself to a blank face. Mm-hmm. We just basically slid the audit comment down the table to the director. And this is one of the only times that I've ever been at an exit conference with the auditor of public accounts. He showed up because of this issue. And we just slid the comment down, shot it down to the end of the table. And the director's reading it, and he just starts turning red and purple, because he realized how bad it was. And yeah, the guy was fired. But then 3 people above him were also fired too. The fallout was really bad. But this was just an explosive thing that this person had done. If he had just sat there and answered my questions, none of that would have happened probably. The likelihood, because I wasn't doing a fraud audit, I was just doing a regular audit, the likelihood of me actually finding all the details of what he had done were maybe 50-50 at best. And he blew it. So, but it was crazy. And I think, would he have done the same thing to a man? I don't think so.
It's hard to know. I think we've all had that experience where we put something together, delivered it to something. I remember years ago when I was doing retail, I got a bunch of retailers together and we started an association where we bought large amounts of goods that we got good pricing on, and we divvied up amongst ourselves, because we all sold the same lines of furniture and home furnishings. And one of our suppliers, who supplied a major line of our furniture, sent his new sales rep or business developer or whatever to this meeting. And we said, okay, we don't really need you, but fine. We were negotiating discounts with our suppliers, the smaller suppliers, and he wanted a piece of that, and I couldn't see why we should give them anything. It made no sense. We had negotiated all ourselves. We were the ones actually selling it. Why would we give them a cut? And he just went off on me, and I was sitting there with my mouth open, like I didn't. It was out of the blue, so I know what you think, and it really bothered me for a long time. And then I realized whatever the problem was, it was his. It wasn't mine. But my first reaction as a woman was, oh, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
But I didn't do anything wrong. I just didn't agree with him, and I just said flat out. And also, I was the ringleader, so I'm sure he was.
You were the
mad
target.
at me.
Yeah, you were the ringleader, the instigator, so the target.
So those things happen, but it's important not to feel like you have necessarily made a mistake. Don't jump immediately to thinking, oh, you did something wrong. Step back, take a breath, let it, and don't get into a shouting ever. I think if there's something we could say is in those tense situations, and those don't happen very much. I mean, obviously this one stands out because it's a fairly rare thing that somebody goes that ballistic on me. But in the face of somebody losing it emotionally, you should not. You should do the opposite. You should be very grounded and be very professional. You are business people. You are pros. This isn't about you personally. It's about business. And in order to be that business person, you have to set aside, your personal, oh, he's attacking me. Well, perhaps so, but you don't have to respond like, you don't have to give him what he wants, or if it's a woman doing it to you, which might be. Also, you don't have to respond to them in kind.
Yeah.
You should not.
So a lot of times my clients are CEOs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I work with the ultra high net worth. Those are our clients. And so often those CEOs are men. And so you walk into a room, I look young, I am young. And so I have a high-pitched voice, and often you can just say, what is this woman going to bring to the table? How can she help me? And I think this is something we all face, and it's coming in with confidence. But I would just say, as you start your career and as you find yourself in that situation, whatever that situation is for you in your path, listen. Because Brenda Snow said it last night, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And when you're starting your career, even where I am now, I recognize I am not the smartest person in the room, but I guarantee I'm typically the best listener. And if you can listen, you will do very well, because that will help you respond to whatever the situation is. And so whether it's a sales situation or a confrontational situation, but that ability to listen first. Don't worry about proving yourself. You prove yourself by listening and responding appropriately and delivering whatever is being asked of you. But as you start your careers, listen. I also will say dress, right? Because I think dress is really important. I wear tall shoes because I like to be taller than my clients. I like to have something over them. It's just who I am. My feet are killing me at the end of the day. But with that in mind, though, women sometimes are the hardest judges. And so when you go into the office environment, women can be your hardest critics. And so, I mean, everybody looks great. You're dressed appropriately. That's phenomenal, because that doesn't always happen.
That's true.
But it really does matter. First impressions matter. So take that into consideration. And I think another thing, especially when I started, and John, you guys will remember this at Merrill, you would go to these conferences, and I would call it Mother Merrill. And there was, again, the only place I've ever gone where the line for the women's restroom is very short to non-existent, and the line to the men's is down the hall. But there is a lot of drinking involved, and you have to really take ownership over your actions. And so I always say the men can drink, but as women, just be really careful. And that's one of the things I always tell young folks. I mean, 1 or 2 drinks is always fine, but it's okay if the men get drunk. They'll joke on each other, but if a woman gets drunk at one of those conferences or work events, it just never goes right. And so that's something I could share as you go out. There's a time to have fun with your work people, and there's a time not to, but I've seen more young people really kind of crash their potential career, at least at our firm, because of that. So that's something I like to share going out. You can have fun at different times, but work conferences are not that place.
I would say throughout your entire career, those events that are company sponsored or they're industry wide, you are judged all day long, 24 hours of your behavior. And getting drunk and being sick. Nobody forgets it. Nobody ever, and it will come up again and again. So save yourself some heartache on that one. It is true that we are judged by a different standard as women. I'm not sure that's going to change anytime soon, and I'm not sure I really need to see a change in the sense of I would think that we could bring up the judgment of our male counterparts,
Yeah.
their behaviors would elevate, not that we have to, drop
Yeah.
down.
We don't
Be
need to
allowed
lower ourselves to a lower standard.
Although-
it would be nice civilly whether
Yes.
the entire world would come up to a more civilized standard, especially from where we are right now, it seems, in the world.
One of my guys last week made a comment about something. Somebody was acting like a part of the man's anatomy, shall we say? A word that in private I wouldn't hesitate to use. But I don't do that I don't do that at the office. And so I just kind of did this when he said, no, look, if you want to be one of the guys, you're just going to have to get over that. And my first response was, thank you, but I don't want to be one of the guys. I don't need to be. I'm very happy with who I am, and I don't have to change. I was actually told by some of the superintendents in the field early on that if I wanted respect, I should curse more. I should curse when I'm talking. And I said, I've spent my entire adult life not doing that, except in private and trying to be careful not to have it bleed over into, in the public sphere. But I don't believe in doing that at work. Well, you'd get more respect, because you act like a man. We understand that stuff. Shortly thereafter, I demonstrated for them how power could be wielded when I removed somebody from the meeting who was busy texting and with his feet up and just doing that whole, like he liked to do, that I wasn't there. So I removed him. And then it was very quiet, and nobody has asked me to curse since to get over it. But you never know. So.
Well, it is funny because my father was just this great character, and one of his things, he didn't believe in swearing. It was not within his personality. And his reason why, he said, actually, resorting to swear words is just a complete lack of imagination.
But it's so relieving when you're really mad.
Oh, yeah. But, you can run outside and do that and then come back in the room.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or go in a closet and do that and come back in the room.
Not at work.
Yeah. But, there's an appropriate time for it and a non-appropriate time for it. And it's interesting how I've had several times in my career where, men have used that in a way that they thought, I think, would either shock or intimidate me.
Yeah.
And, and then they're kind of stunned because I'll just look at them like, they're kind of like this little bug on a slide that I'm going to put under a microscope or something like that. Like, what was that all about? And it just stops them dead. Yeah. And then they get embarrassed because they're like, oh, she didn't react. I didn't intimidate her. I didn't, whatever reaction they were expecting out of me, they didn't get.
Years ago, we had to prove that we were as good as the guys. I don't think that's the case anymore in most respects. I think, or just to be more like them, be as tough as they are. And I don't think we have to. We are tough. We know that there wouldn't be many generations after us if men had to give birth. So there's no question about. No offense, guys in the room.
One day that may be possible. Right now, it's not.
It's not. There isn't a question of are we strong. It isn't a question of are we tough.
It's not.
We are all of the above. Are we smart? We work harder. We take more. We are stubborn in a good way. I think we don't have to behave in a way they expect us to behave in order to be successful and respected in business. We don't. Those are just role models that have been carried forward through generations. And with the younger guys, I see that's not there. At least nowhere near. But you may not have the advantage of going into a firm where they're all your peers. You're going to have some senior people, and they're probably going to be your bosses. And if they're men and they have certain way of dealing with people, you aren't going to be able to change that. So standing up and saying, I don't mean about anything that's over the line, but I mean, in the way they say, okay, look, I need that by 4:00 this afternoon. You better get it to me. You don't get to say, I don't like being talked to like that. You can, but I don't recommend it because that's the way they do everybody. That's the style that you have to deal with that. But you also don't have to take it as personal. And you shouldn't because you know who you are inside. If you're doing the best you can, you just continue on doing the best you can.
Well, and I think one of the questions that there were some questions that were gathered ahead of this panel. One of the questions was, how to deal with things like the term I think was used like microaggression within the working, and
Is that passive aggressive?
I think that's passive aggressive. I think, but I could be wrong on that. So maybe if somebody has a different definition, that'd be great. But there are always going to be people that have their own issues, and it's telling how a company deals with that. How the road ends at the top person's office. Okay, that's where the responsibility ends. Okay, that's me. In my business, that's Marsha and hers. Yeah. It's how that person in that top position, if they are aware of that behavior and how they manage it, tells you a lot about that overall environment of the company. And if it's not dealt with well and it's allowed perpetually over and over and over again, that probably tells you a lot about your comfort level of staying in that company. Are you going to be able to really influence if it's coming from the top down? Are you going to be able to cause any sort of change there? You as a new person coming in at the bottom level, not likely. Yeah. In which case, it's best to make the decision then to go somewhere else and find a better environment to work in where you don't have those issues. Because those are the exceptions, not the rules in businesses. Because businesses don't survive behaving that way overall over the long term. They really don't. Because nobody wants to work there. Their customers don't want to deal with them. They usually have bad business practices that go along with that behavior. They just don't have longevity.
But I think in situations too, having the courage to, at an appropriate time, address the situation.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And so I think, and I've seen it with our younger employees, they expect management to resolve everything for them. And management is not going to do that, particularly in a large firm. And so you're going to have the courage to have that conversation, take the emotion out of it, but you're going to have to address it. And the situation is, is there something, and you have to do it from your perspective, because the only person you can control is you, right? You can't control the other person. You can control you. And so what could I do to help the situation better? I understand you have some frustrations with me. What am I doing that can cause it? Having that conversation, taking ownership over your actions and what you can do to resolve it. And obviously there's certain situations that you have to bring to management, but for the most part, having the courage to resolve those situations on your own, or at least have the first attempt to resolve it on your own and make sure that you document that you did that. So, but I think it would be great if we could hear kind of what are some of your concerns as you're heading into the workplace? What are some of your concerns or thoughts or any?
Or even things that you've experienced, in doing jobs. So I think you were the first.
Just, I received a promotion last summer, and kind of like a lot of the backlash was just mostly pointing to my appearance, and that's the only reason why I got it, and I just attribute that to jealousy. Mm-hmm. But then yesterday when I was talking to one of my peers, I told them that I was a management major, and they're like, "Oh, that's a good suit for you because you'll just get handed things."
You just gotta laugh, and you know what? If you're pretty, own it, accept it.
Yeah.
It's who you are. Use it to your advantage. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Just look at them and say, "Thank you." That was a nice compliment.
I got it.
And if they think you're not smart because you're attractive, that's when you've got up on them because they don't see you coming.
Yeah, it's a stealth method of doing well.
Underestimating you because you're pretty is not a bad thing. Yeah.
I always like it when people underestimate me, and it's really funny because I was here at an event at CNU and have been talking to a gentleman who serves on one of the boards here, and he was asking me, well, what do you do? And of course I was like, I have my my little accounting firm. I live out in the middle of nowhere, not any big deal. And then we started on the topic of real estate, which I haven't known quite a bit about, and because he's a real estate guy. And he ended up picking my brain on all these different tax issues and stuff. And 10 minutes later, he's dragging his wife over. It's you have to meet this woman. She's really smart. And it was and it started out, you could tell when I initially started talking to him, he was just kind of going, oh, yeah, it's just, this little fluffy woman who just doesn't know much of anything. And, within a half an hour, the whole, thing had turned around a different way. So it was really kind of fascinating.
I was just going to say, going off of that, my uncle owns his own business, and so he had this Christmas party with a bunch of his friends who also own their own business and stuff, and they were asking what I wanted to do, and I was telling them, and they looked at me and pretty much kind of said the same thing. They said, oh, that's cute, but this is pretty for anyone to take you seriously. They said, you can really just focus on finding a husband.
Yeah.
And
you can be their boss someday.
Yeah, and it's good to be their boss. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I was going to ask, how do you all stay motivated in situations, whether it's dealing with men who think that you're below them, or just tough situations doing in the workforce where you just want to...
Yeah. For me, I stay motivated because I actually love what I do. I think I'm very fortunate in that I have followed into a career. Again, it wasn't the career that I first thought I would have, but I love it. So to me, I can ignore the noise, and when I get to focus on the clients and what we're doing, I love it. And the other thing is my motivation is my kids, so I work for them is what I say. So when I have to miss something, I'm like, hey, it's not by choice. I got to pay for you. So, but it is. So I think you just, you got to rise above the noise, stay focused on what's really important to you, and just not get brought down into the weeds. Yeah.
For me, it's finding other women in similar positions and belonging to organizations where executive women come together. It's extremely therapeutic. It's sort of like sorority plus with all those years in between, But because they understand the days when I was driven up the wall at the office thinking, I will never be able to get anybody to listen to this. Like, what am I doing here? And I would call my friend who has a engineering company, a very successful one, and that she started and continues to run to this day. And we'd go out for a drink, or we'd just get on the phone and talk, and she would listen to me vent, and she had the exact same experiences because she's an engineer in a man's world, in defense spending and defense contracting. And by the end of the conversation, I felt like I was not alone in doing this. Because yes, you will always have moments when you just feel drained and you just don't feel like, oh, yeah, let me go home and go to bed. Having female friends that you have managed to keep and develop. If you have a mentor, that's great. If you don't, you have friends that share similar experiences, that can not just let you bitch, but also support you and say, it's okay, you'll rise above this, you'll get through it.
And I think what you mentioned, I think having somebody that's outside of your workplace.
Yes,
that's
that
key.
goes without saying. Outside of the workplace, don't want to be in a little clique at the office.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting because a lot of my network was built in two different ways. One comes from a childhood association of mine, who she went through law school, ended up as a federal immigration judge, and so has this. She vicariously by connection, I ended up with this whole group of women who are very high powered in the immigration refugee community. And they are a really tough bunch. They have seen everything ugly in the world that you can possibly imagine. And they're a great resource. But also within the accounting profession, I participated a lot and did a lot of volunteer work with the Virginia Society of CPAs. So like professionals working in the same field as me. When I worked up to a certain level of heading committees there, my group was both men and women, but we were all of the top management level owners of the accounting firms. So, but when I was starting, it was, a much lower level of, people like, getting into the industry. And there's relationships built as we built our way through our careers. And, we all still do stay in touch. Those networks are fabulous, and they can do a lot of, they're a good source of venting and a good source of support. And
Great networking too.
yeah, because it's almost all the opportunities the doors that I've had opened for my career have been from those networks that were built at a very young point when we were all just starting out. So
Teresa.
Just to add one thing about networking, back in the 70s, and it happened here at Christopher Newport, an organization was formed called the Peninsula Women's Network.
Mhm.
And that is a good network if you're going to work locally, or try to network into other communities. But they're all business women. That's before Kiwanis and Rotary allowed women into their groups. And
Yeah.
when I built my business, started building my business 25 years ago, after a wonderful stay with Hudgins, and that network helped me to build my business.
Yeah.
Did I know that at the time? You go in with the idea of just networking, not what can you get from it, but what can you give to other
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and you keep that network alive,
Yeah.
and that's just very important.
And to add to that, I mean, I live in a very small community. Matthews County has less than 9,000 people in the whole county. The only stoplight is on the Gwynns Island drawbridge. So, I mean, we're really out there. We're at the end of the road. Everything that gets done in that community is through people knowing other people. And we know our community so well. We know where the needs are. We know where the wealth is. And the ability to go and match things, where, somebody has, need and there's, no government program out there, or there's just no money left or something like that. There are people that we can go to in our community to help every day of every year.
Yeah.
And that's the network.
What you both just said, I just had to thank you very much for mentioning PWN, because as I mentioned earlier in the invitation to the reception for continuing this dialogue, and this is probably the appropriate time to remind everybody, if you didn't get a flyer, please plan to come to continuing the dialogue, the reception that we're going to host as a new school business as part of the CNU Global Status of Women and Girls Conference. Well, what I said in the introduction was that we've been trying for the last 2 years here at CNU to launch an offshoot of the Peninsula Women's Network called the Collegiate Women's Network, because PWN approached me a couple of years ago. I'm a member of PWN, I just happen to be very active, and they said, can you help us connect with young women students at CNU? We want to find out, we want a focus group there, we want to find out how to recruit, how to hire, what management issues we need to pay attention to, so on and so forth. And we did that across the span of a year, and the young women who participated got so energized that they wanted to create a collegiate women's network, and they graduated.
Yeah.
So looking for volunteers.
So where we are this year is,
You have a question?
we'll have the reception,
Yes.
and then we'll see what happens
Before
going
she
forward
shuts
with
it
the
down.
WC organization. Thank you so much for that.
One last question.
Okay, so for me, I'm a senior, I'm a marketing major, and so obviously it's like, are you going to grad school, are you looking for jobs? That conversation comes up a lot between professors, but especially amongst us students. And there's like a very distinct conversation I had with a friend of mine, and I noticed that we're thinking about, what's the ideal salary you're gonna get after college? And it was just amazing for me. It was like, honestly, anything above 40, right? But it was interesting for me to notice that he was like, I would only accept anything above, like at least $70,000 a year.
Oh, good luck to him.
And
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah.
It's going to Wall
very
Street.
interesting, his confidence in what he stated.
Yeah.
And just, he's like, well, if they're gonna try to give me something a little lower, I'll negotiate. And I just
Yeah,
noticed,
sure.
why is there a difference between like my confidence between him and
Yeah.
me? And I noticed that first of all, like he's obviously like he identifies as a man and I'm a woman, and also I am a woman of color, and then also he comes from a much more like wealthier like family or so. So it's one of those things. I guess my question is, how have you guys experienced like negotiating your salary or a higher pay, or any advice on that?
First of all, you should know that he's probably
He's
not
way
gonna get it.
he's way out of range.
He's
Yeah.
just, but like
Yeah.
men, like, the football team, even if you're the lowest one, we're going to beat them. I mean, there's that jazz yourself up
Yeah.
and just go ahead on in. And that's fine. That's the way they approach it. You're more pragmatic, saying, look, I don't have a lot of skill sets going in. I got to learn something, so I'll start in a range that I can at least live on, and then we'll grow from there. I would be with you on that one. I don't think that's a woman or a man thing. I just think that you're being realistic, and you're probably going to get further. He's going to be a little disappointed.
And look at what your job is, right?
Yeah.
Where so you have to set the expectation from what kind of jobs are interest to you. Because if you're looking at Wall Street, sure, that makes sense. But if you're looking, somewhere, you just have to look for what the industry is. And there's the information out there, but you need to educate yourself in what is a good starting salary for somebody with my education and my work experience. So you need to go into that first interview with an idea in mind, not just a number you pull out of the air.
Exactly.
But do some research.
Be able to substantiate it, because when you go in, you don't have a lot behind you to tell an employer, I have this skill set and this proven skill set, unless you really have some interesting internships, or you've lived overseas, or if you have, you might have something in your family story that shows that you have some depth to your awareness and your interaction with other people and other cultures, or whatever. You need to see yourself and add up all that you think you bring to the table, but go in with saying, hey, I want to learn. I am here to learn as much as I can possibly. Just give me a chance, because that from the base level, that's what we want to hear. We want to know somebody's interested in what we do and wants to give to us, because we know we're going to spend a lot of money on you for the first few years before you're going to be able to be, giving back in a productive way. And then by then you're going like, okay, I'm on to my next job. It's 4.5 years. It's time to change.
The statistics say it's time to move. And the other thing is, it's, one of the things that, with my group of, networks and friends, the one thing that has stuck with all of us, and why we are all friends, is that throughout our whole working career, it has been the curiosity of constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly changing, constantly growing, that you need to follow through your whole career. Don't get stuck in a rut. Don't just get comfortable and, stay in a position, because you're going to atrophy. Your brain's going to atrophy. Your ability to advance is going to go away. Stay curious and keep growing.
Pushing yourself more and more. And if money is the only thing that motivates you, you're probably not going to love your work after a period of time. You're just not. Tend to pay more for jobs that are less attractive or require really highly specialized skills. So, you can, the more skills you have, that's how you negotiate your higher salaries. You say to your employer, I've been here 3 years and look at what I've done. This, show, demonstrate, and I've learned this, and now I can do this, and I want to go here. And I think that is worth XYZ numbers. That's how you negotiate. You have to have something that you can show, demonstrated ability, either coming in with some unusual skills at ground zero, or as you go up the chain, each job you've built a larger body of work that you can point to that was successful, that you did well, and show your value. Remind the employers tend to not just say, oh, it's time to give Susie a raise, let's go do it. Susie has to knock on that door and say, excuse me, I think that I bring this in and I would like to show you why, and I would like to look at, because people don't want to lose good employees.
But back it up with industry statistics,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing about, the dissemination of information that's out there. You can find that data. It's all out there. When we were coming up, you can find it, unless you happen to know somebody who was working in that industry.
And don't be afraid of shooting a little bit higher than you think, because most women tend to undervalue themselves. And so shoot a little bit higher and see what happens. The worst they'll say is, I think we can give you a raise, but not that. And they explain why, and then you can ask them, what do I need to do to be able to move up to this next position? And they can give you an outline, and should. This is what you need to do, and this is what you need to learn. But it's an interactive. It's not a shouldn't be a confrontational. We need good employees, and we will pay for good employees. I don't like people that don't have anything behind them making demands in a confrontational way, because as far as I'm concerned,
that's blackmail.
Bye-bye.
But yeah, I mean, if you've invested a lot as a business manager in your employees, in getting them trained up to a certain level, and
Right, you want to keep them.
yeah, you do. I mean, you don't want somebody else to get the benefit of all that work you've put into training this person. So yeah, I mean, you do want to keep them, and you also most businesses want to provide a path of advancement, because again, that's the only way you're going to keep good employees.
So I started my career. Then I did go back and get my MBA. And so, kind of to the question of when is the right time for business school or the next level of education, and I think that was a hard challenge. I went back probably a little too late is what I would say, because I had already had kids and it was really hard.
It's never too late.
It's never too late.
No, it was never too late, but it about broke me. And so,
What doesn't kill you makes you.
There you go. Yeah.
but
And why is it that women have to, feel as though, I've got all these layers? I mean, you don't hear many men say, "Oh, well, I have kids, so I can't go back and get my graduate degree."
Yeah.
There's
I was
other
also a
reasons
single
for
mom,
that.
so
Oh, there you go. That would be one.
so my kids went with, but it is hard, and I think for me it was great because I've been working in the industry. We had the recession of 2008, 2009, and I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, the sky was falling. We didn't know if Bank of America was going to exist. It was really a scary moment in time, and I looked around, and for the role that I had, the job description, I didn't qualify because I had really just gotten there based on merit. I didn't have I didn't have my law degree. I didn't have my MBA. I didn't have any of the things that they were asking for to have the role that I had. And I thought, oh Lord, when this I'm not going to get lucky the next time, right? I figured I got lucky because I was also the youngest person at my position, so I probably was the least expensive to keep. And so
True.
So I knew that wasn't going to happen the second time around, because in the industry it does have cycles. And so I did go back to school to get my MBA because I wanted to make sure I could check that box. So that the when to go back question is a hard one, and I think it's, if you're starting in your career, the reason I didn't do it is I was moving so fast, I didn't want to take a time out. How do you take a time out when you're moving quick? And so it's a hard one, but don't discount it, because I think it is important to get there at some point.
You still need to prove that you can. My daughter, as I said to some of you earlier, is in marketing and has had a career in marketing. She can't quite make the C-suite. Oh, no, it's a big international firm, so it is pretty high up there. But I always told her she needed an MBA, and she kept saying she would do it. But then she didn't want to take the time out to do it, and now she realizes that she is bumping but will not make it. I tell her she has to be able to read the financials. She has to understand. She has to be able to talk the talk. She has to understand and be able to speak to the finances, the investment possibilities, all of the management issues that she hasn't really gotten into, although she's very smart. So I'm just putting that out there for you to think about. Depends on where you want to go, obviously.
A lesson that my father taught us, and he had 3 daughters. We're all very successful in our own right. And what I teach my boys who are now in high school is read the front page of the Wall Street Journal every day. If you have time, go deeper, but read that front page for the synopsis. Get some, The Economist, get some of the trade journals in the industry you're looking for. You don't have to become they all have, like, the first few pages are just summaries.
Be conversant
Yeah.
in economics,
Know what's going on.
in finance, know what's happening, and your local paper too. Read the front page, just so that you can have an intelligent understanding of your world.
There should never be a time when you stop reading and learning, ever.
Or being aware of everything
Yeah.
around you.
I mean, my husband laughs at me because I'm like this just obsessive reader. I mean, I always have 2 books going at the same time. Read at least like 2 or 3 newspapers every day, because it's information. It's data gathering. And how it's going to. It may be something that I need to then apply, to one of my clients. It may be something that impacts us. It may just be then being able to carry on a conversation at a social event, because you're going to
Yeah.
be out and socializing as part of your careers. So, don't stop reading. Don't stop learning.
I think we are running
So
over
much.
here.
Yeah.
You're very welcome.